Why, hi there, it's Uncle Rod. Nothing to look at, just gonna chat on the camera for a bit while the cat bathes herself and all that. I started this video a few minutes ago, and then she wanted some loving. So maybe you actually get to see that blooper of her actually interrupting. Today we're going to talk about broadcasting, and I'm going to give you some tips that I think that, why you guys, some of you think that I'm actually halfway decent at what I do. Some things I've learned over the years. I think this video will actually work for those of you who call fake games like I do on Retro Sports Network, and those of you who are looking to be interested in becoming actual broadcasters of games. Okay? There's been a spate is the right word, of retirements recently, and I think I don't know about football, but baseball, basketball, hockey, and golf. And so there's some open spots right now. No, I'm not going out for any of those jobs. But, I figured I would just kind of pass along some things I know and what, I do to try to give you guys the best broadcast that I can, regardless of what it is that I choose to show. So, not going to talk about games as far as, what works and what doesn't work for that. Just what do I do, and what do I consider to be a good broadcast as far as this is more of a play-by-play thing as opposed to color. So let's start with the three things that I think you need to be able to do. You got to love whatever sport that you're doing. If you're a true professional, you can do anything. But it's going to come across if you are not a huge fan of the sport that you're being paid to cover. I'm not talking about myself or Gardner or anything like that. I'm talking about actual broadcasting. Hold on one sec. The cat rubbed up my nose and it itched. I mean, if you're getting paid lots of money, you can pretend to like a lot of different things. I give Joe Buck credit for being honest about the fact that he was bored calling baseball. He certainly had the gravitas and the clout in the industry to pretty much call what he wanted, and good for him. I mean, he had done it, and his dad, of course, is a Hall of Fame broadcaster, and Joe Buck is a really good broadcaster. Don't at me at that one. I think for the most part he is a really good broadcaster. Football certainly is his sport, and that's what he focuses on, and I think he does a good job doing it. So that's number one. If you're getting into the business or doing simulation games, call what you love. It will make a great deal of difference in how you approach going in front of a microphone and going in front of a camera. Call what you love. That's tip number two. What makes an excellent broadcaster? Well, I think he or she needs to be entertaining to a degree. I think they need to bring a level of genuine excitement and not, WWF type excitement to something like that. And I think you also got to treat your audience with full knowledge and respect. They know what they're watching, whether you are calling a simulated sporting event like I do, or you're calling someone's soccer game or basketball game on a junior or middle school or high school level or small college, or even especially if you're calling, a pro event, because the people who are taking the time to watch what you do know more about what they're watching than you probably do, unless you were doing a ton of prep work. Who is watching a middle school softball game? Parents and grandparents are watching them, and they have a genuine stake and interest in what they are seeing. And so you really can't pass it off and be bored if that's what it's not going to make for a good broadcast. They know what they're looking for. That doesn't mean that you need to think that Jenny whatchamacallit is the best softball or soccer player ever. That's not true. But you certainly can't be getting on to Jenny whatchamacallit because she makes a mistake. And you can't be bored because the quality of play is not what you think it should be because again, at early levels of this stuff, it's parents and grandparents watching to see their child perform, and they think that their child is great and know what their strengths are and kind of buffer over the weaknesses. So that's one thing. So it's energy, enthusiasm, treat your audience with that they know what they're talking about, and I'll try to be entertaining at the same time. That is a very, very difficult line to walk. Now, in the type of broadcasting that I do, it's easy to kind of go off and sing and dance and go off into monologues and try to tie it into a baseball game because I'm the one that controls the pace. I know that I want to be on for roughly around an hour, give or take, to get through a 9-inning game. And because I generally live stream what I do, the chat on Twitch, which is my primary live medium, kind of dictates what we're going to talk about over the next hour or the last hour or whatever it is. I provide the details in the ball game. They provide interesting things to talk about, and we do that. In a real broadcast, you really can only be somewhat interactive. I mean, you really can't go into song and dance routines or, who can, best Sammy Davis Jr. impressions like I can get into. Who can hit a lefty? Again, that's the whole point of being entertaining when you're playing a game that doesn't really exist. In a real game, you really can't do that. I know that John Sterling, who's just retiring as a broadcaster for the New York Yankees, did get into show tunes and nicknames and that. And Chris Berman got into nicknames and all that. And again, for a while, that can be quite entertaining because it's different. And again, in a world full of endless possibilities for you to watch or listen to, you need something to stand out. Generally, my rule of thumb in standing out is give you a broadcast that I would want to watch or listen to myself. Now, I don't try to do Vin Scully, the legendary baseball broadcaster. I might mimic him in some ways. I know that there are times that I sound like him, and my speech patterns kind of mimic his because, look, if you're going to copy from somebody or emulate someone, you do it from the best that ever did it. I mean, if you've ever watched an Al Michaels broadcast, that's Scully. Michaels has his own spin on it, but generally, when Al Michaels was at his best, he was doing a very good emulation of Vin Scully, putting in his own things there. I don't try to do Scully, although I can do a very mediocre Vin Scully impression. Brought to you by Farmer John. Throw your hat in the air, Fernando's on the mound. But that's not how I think about doing a game. I think all four of the major sports, and golf and tennis kind of go along with that as well, they all require a certain pacing. I know that Baseball Replay Journal was talking about, talking in a melodic tone the other day. That doesn't necessarily mean if you're kind of monotone that you're not a good announcer. Not at all. But being able, I think pacing for whatever it is that you're calling, and if it happens to be melodic, great. You can be quite nasally and be a good broadcaster. I think that Al Michaels certainly fits that mold. Scully, of course, grew up singing in a choir in church, and so timing in that was something that he had worked on. And goodness gracious, by the time that he got into NBC's Game of the Week in 1983, he'd been doing this for 33 years. In fact, he called his first World Series at 23 years old or something like that. Just, he just knew what he was doing. And so let's kind of go through, the best paces and to do for sport. Baseball is all about storytelling, which is why I enjoy calling it so much, because you can fit in a lot, get in the play, move on, engage your audience, and move on and just move the game along. it's a sport that is a perfect marriage for radio or audio because you can pretty much talk about anything that's related to the subject. So, in my baseball broadcast, I don't, even though they're from previous seasons of games, I don't treat it like it's that. I'll mention the date, I'll mention the standings and all that, but it's not like if you went to Sirius Satellite Radio and put on 80s on 80 all weekend and sit there and listen to, or 70s on 7 on the weekends and listen to Casey Kasem's top 40 reruns for 48 hours. That's not what I do. I try to put everything into a contemporary thing where they're playing in front of you. Yes, it's, in this case, 1988 players and 1988 games, but they're playing them on the current day I'm playing them and all that. And so we try to make sure that, there might be stories on players or whatever comes up in the chat, because if you're doing, calling fake games like I do, your chat are your best producers. They're going to tell you if you make a mistake or pass along an interesting story and all that. So baseball is, a slower paced sport. You can work a lot of things in. And again, I guess the best basic thing, and you can put this in for all the sports, is as long as you follow the ball, you are not going to get into trouble. I learned that from listening to Red Barber on Bob Costas' show on the radio when I was in high school. You can never get in trouble following the ball. Football is about getting excited for the next play, whether it's radio or television. On television, your color guy is going to pretty much talk until the team breaks the huddle, and then television and football are the perfect marriage. It shows all the pictures. You can see what the formation is, and that you call the play and you get out of the way for your color guy. If it's just you, if you're doing a small enough thing, small college or high school, have a basic enough knowledge to know what you're talking about. So you're not going to go, what are they going to run on 3rd and 10? Well, there's a couple of options. You can run a draw to see if you can just, get 7 or 8 yards to give yourself more room to punt, or you're going to try to throw a pass of some sort to get you 10 yards. So, again, energy, you want to be up for it unless it's a blowout, because football does kind of require more of your attention, and everyone has a rooting interest. On a lower level, again, just like with any other, middle school or high school sport, the people who are watching it are going to know more about their favorite player than you are, unless it's your kid or grandkid that's playing, then that qualifies as you. And so, again, treat your, respect your audience. Never, ever, ever talk down to your audience. They're there to enjoy whatever it is that they're watching, and it's your job to guide them along that and be informative and be engaging and be entertaining. It's a tough thing to do. And if you're doing this for real and you're doing it on television or an internet stream, chances are you got somebody in your ear going, all right, replay here, here's the block again, or get in the promo for the next show, or don't forget it's Stucky's Truck Shop, or Truck Stop is doing the MVP of the game, and you got to read the promo for the TV show that you're never going to watch, and all that. I mean, it's what you don't see or don't hear is everything that goes on. I guess my cat's bored of what's going on, and you got to make it all as seamless as possible. Okay, so for football, it's you're in your ear. Here's the replay. Get in the promo. Let your color guy talk. Why Pat Summerall was one of the best ever for that is to let John Madden do all the work. And Madden knew enough about football, knew enough how to talk about football, loved the sport enough to make it entertaining, engaging, and informative. You were going to learn something, whether you knew you were going to learn something from Madden or not. 1 knee equals 2 feet, okay? So, those 3 things right there, Madden was perfect at it, and Summerall, as his play-by-play guy, just kind of set him up. 3rd down, Aikman to Irvin, 15 yards, 1st down. Get in, get out. That's, to me, the ideal football play-by-play guy. Let your analyst do it. Now, if your analyst isn't very good, help him out. You know, ask helpful questions. What'd you see there, Bob? Wasn't that a good block there by the left guard? Or it's third and long, chances are they're going to be, Deion Sanders is going to be double covering the top receiver. Do you trust the tight end to get you, do that. I mean, it's you're leading the broadcast. Help out your color person. In baseball, everyone's got a color guy, and it's good for telling stories back and forth. But on radio, I think the best thing is to be solo. It's just you and the audience, and you got enough time, even with the pitch clock, to say, you going to steal here? Taking a big lead? Whatever. Basketball play-by-play on television is kind of taking a backseat. Marv Albert, of course, I think was the all-time best. Chick Hearn, who did a simulcast all those years for the Lakers, very good on television, and he didn't over-explain anything. I thought Dick Stockton was excellent at his years as CBS. Again, kind of a good. You always had different color people. I didn't have anyone for more than a couple of years, and that's always hard to do at a top level when you're not working with the same people year in and year out. I mean, one of the things that Summerall and Madden were able to do was they worked so long together that they could anticipate what the other one wanted to do. And I think Stockton worked with, on his CBS years, 5 or 6 different color guys, and that just makes it difficult to do. And you have, people like Bill Russell, who was, knew the game inside and out, but didn't necessarily know the best way to get things through, to Hubie Brown, who probably broke things down at a level that 12-year-olds could pick up on what Hubie Brown was saying and try to work off the best for everybody. Again, along with having people in your ear saying, get in the promo for 60 minutes, it's next, blah, 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 blah. I think one of the things that hurts basketball play-by-play guys, it was the emergence of Dick Vitale, who early in his career was excellent along with his enthusiasm. So he could be enthusiastic, he could be engaging, and he could be informative, along with being entertaining. After the first few years, it kind of got old a little bit, and so he would say the same things over and over and over again. But when he first started, he was insightful enough to get through and take up that time as the offense set up in the half court. And again, a lot like Summerall and Madden, his play-by-play partners would take over when it was time. In basketball, when the play is set and when the point guard or whoever's handling it is about to start the play, that's when the play-by-play guy takes over. Kevin Harlan is very good. Brian Anderson, very good. Mike Breen at ESPN is very good at what they do. It takes years and years of practice to do it, and knowing when to step in, and knowing when to go back and give your partner or color guy or sideline reporter, because everyone's got a sideline reporter now, to get in what they need to get in. Again, keep it moving, and there. In hockey, it's all about rapid fire. And I'm going to compliment my friend Dave Gardner, who I think does a very good job doing the junior hockey. He is right. There are, I'll watch a hockey stream every once in a while, and especially over the college, and they're telling stories and kind of paying half attention to the game. Hockey is the fastest sport of the big four. And not everybody, especially, if you're playing a rival school or that, knows everybody on the team. And so it's important, especially even on television, to go pass by pass. How Doc Emmerich was able to weave in distinct, short, telling play-by-play and weave in all the stories like you do in a baseball game is beyond me. But again, he had years and years and years of practice to get it right. And he was entertaining, engaging, informative. And he had, at least in his time at NBC, he had Eddie Olczyk to feed off of too, who was a pretty good analyst in his own right. So having that, chemistry and combination there took some of the work away, took some of the pressure off of Doc Emmerich. When he worked with Bill Clement on Sports Channel and ESPN to some degree, and with the Flyers or wherever else that Emmerich worked, that again, a very good pair. A color guy on hockey needs to know when he can get in, which is any time from the post-commercial to the face-off, or when they're setting it up behind the net to start the rush the other way, to knowing when to shut up and let the play-by-play guy go. Bob Cole, who I think is my favorite play-by-play guy in hockey, would just when Harry Neale, who was another very good analyst on CBC and Hockey Night in Canada. And let me tell you, Hockey Night in Canada in the late 80s and early 90s was the best television production out there for sports. What they did week in and week out, especially during the Stanley Cup playoffs, top notch every night. It was fantastic to do it for a fast-paced thing. Between that and Frank Chirkanian with golf at CBS, it's tough things to do. Anyway, when Harry Neale got the #1 job for CBC as the color guy, Bob Cole would just kind of put his hand on top of Harry's as Cole did the play-by-play, and it was time for Harry to talk. He'd move his hand, and Harry knew. And then after a while, Harry knew when to step in and when to go through, and they made a very good combination. But again, you don't need to get in a lot of storytelling there. You're playing traffic cop as a play-by-play guy in hockey, and Cole was excellent as telling you who had the puck and where the puck was and what was good and what was great and what you should get excited about. And the one thing that I've mentioned in common about all these people, Emmerich and Cole and all that, is that they genuinely loved their sport. Think of Keith Jackson. Think of with college football. Vern Lundquist with what he did with the SEC in college basketball overall. Vin Scully, Ernie Harwell, Ned Morton, all genuinely loved their sport that they're best known for covering. If you do that, it just shines through, and it really does make you want to watch or listen. You can criticize Ken Harrelson or John Sterling for homerific calls and missing things, but you never doubted that they had a genuine love for what they did. I'm sure the paychecks helped, but John, you can root for teams, and people sometimes do that. It's not the way I call things, but there's nothing wrong with being a homer as long as you're being fair. Probably one of the best ever doing that was Skip Carey. Of course he wanted the Braves to win, but if the Braves made a bad play, he would let you know the Braves made a bad play. And if somebody made a good play against the Braves, he'd tip his hat to that. You can be a homer without being obnoxious. But again, all these people that I've mentioned, they genuinely loved what they did. And whether it was for a team effort or a national effort, it showed. And if they love and care about what they do, you are going to stick around longer for what they do. Today's broadcasters have so much information to pile through. For years, okay, you need to get in this stat, you need to get in that stat. And there's two camps, obviously, or three different camps for any, national sports broadcast that you watch. Maybe four. You got the betting angle, then you got to get that stuff in there. You got the fantasy angle, so you got to puke out stats whether you want to or not. That Joe Bob Willie's fourth catch of the day for 117 yards and a touchdown. And, that's a pretty good day. And so you got to get your fantasy people in there. You get the drive-bys who are just kind of sitting there going through like a spouse, a girlfriend, a boyfriend, or whatever, who really doesn't care. It needs to, do something before their eyes glaze over. So that's one of the reasons why you need to be entertaining. And then you have the hardcore fan who probably knows more about the team or thinks they know about the team or the sport than you do. You got to make all those audiences happy, and that's tricky to do. So here, I guess, so those are the four. You need to be entertaining, you need to be engaging, you need to be informative, and you got to have fun doing it. I found it interesting years later to know that Jim Simpson and Keith Jackson were not baseball fans, and they both had pretty prominent roles in the 70s and early 80s, at least Jackson did, in calling baseball games. Now, they both were very credible. Keith Jackson was much better at baseball play-by-play than he gave himself credit for. It wasn't college football, which was Jackson's bread and butter, but Jackson could call a pretty good baseball game. And when he wasn't stuck with Howard Cosell, he was actually he was very, very good at what he did. But again, highly trained professionals. Here's your assignment, go do it. So those four things. Now, how do you do that? Well, A, you need practice. And don't be afraid to sit there in front of your TV set if you're an aspiring broadcaster, mute the sound, and go to town. Again, do a broadcast that you think that you'd want to listen to. The rough edges will get smoothed out if you do it enough. There's nothing wrong with getting excited, overly excited. Just don't force it. Don't force being excited. Let it come to you naturally. Here's the thing, as I'm droning on and on and on. Here's the thing. Most of the games that you're ever going to call are going to be mundane. They're going to be blowouts, or your team is going to get the snot kicked out of it, or a not very offensive game, or a sloppy game, or in bad weather conditions, or hot days, or whatever. They're going to be routine. Don't try to force something into a broadcast when there's nothing really going on. Be honest with the audience. They know that it's a 1-0 soccer game, or they know that Susie Cream Cheese just botched her third ball of the game at third. And again, never get personal, especially with anyone that is not a top-level professional athlete. Those kids feel bad enough on their own without some stranger going, they suck. Never, ever, ever make it personal. So most of what you're going to do is mundane. And if you're calling specifically for one team and that team isn't doing very well, again, you're going to have that more often than not. Save the, oh my goodness and the goodness graciousness and all that for when the game rises to the occasion. And that's not all that often. I mean, how many times have we thought, best two teams on the planet in this particular sport, and here we go, let's see what we got here, and it's over within the first 15 minutes. So how do you do that? How do you entertain people? Practice. What are some of the things that I do? You always have to be willing to learn and always willing to change a little bit. No. She's hungry. So what do I do to learn about, timing and pacing? I watch a lot of things. I watch a lot of interviews. I watched a fair amount of Johnny Carson clips, David Letterman clips, Carol Burnett clips. Why? Because they were entertaining. And in the interviews, they can be somewhat informative, and sometimes they can just be out and out funny, but they always went straight live to tape. Carol Burnett, you either got the dress rehearsal sketch or the nighttime sketch, depending on which one was better, but they didn't stop down and edit. And the one thing that you're going to notice, if you're a prospective broadcaster, is you have no safety net. You do not know what you are about to see. Every time that I go live, I have no idea what's going to happen. I could get the greatest game ever, or it could be 8-0 in the second inning, and I've got 45 minutes of a game that's over. And how do you feel that? Again, some of that's experience. But for me, seeing how people develop their timing and have their timing and how to be successful. I mean, if you want to learn how to handle things when things go bad, go watch Johnny Carson monologues. Oh my goodness, because what comes out of a writer they might think is funny doesn't necessarily work in front of a live audience. And so Carson had 8 minutes a night to fill, and if the jokes worked, great, and if they didn't, it was even funnier because he was trying to cover. You got to learn how to improv, because everything you do, no matter how well prepared you are, whether in the simulation sports, you're not doing a lot of prep work. Some of it, but you're not really doing a lot of serious prep work. You don't need to do depth charts and all that. The game will do that for you. But if you're doing this in real life, and you've been handed a roster 5 minutes beforehand, and you might know 4 or 5 players, and you've got an hour and a half to kill in a game that's just god awful, you got to learn those skills. You are out there on your own, and you got to figure it out. And so the best prep work is to go back and watch some old TV shows and see how they did it. How do you stay engaged over the course of an interview? Over a course of a skit that isn't going well. And they know it's not going well. What did they do? And again, no safety net. You are completely on your own, or you and your color person's on your own, and your cameraman, or whatever. You gotta figure it out. And you can't say, this sucks. That doesn't work that way. You gotta keep them entertained somehow. And again, storytelling. What I always think that I'm gonna run out of stories, regardless of what it is that I call. But something is gonna remind you in that type of situation of something that you might have went through. Might not even necessarily have to do with that sport. I remember as a kid, one night we're, watching the hockey game on 38, and the Bruins kind of like this, just couldn't get anything going right. And at one point, they pan over to the bench, and Terry O'Reilly is telling Bobby Orr the funniest story in the world. I mean, the Bruins are getting beat 7-0, but they're something like that. Something is going to pop into your head to relate to that, whatever it is. Like, oh, this reminds me of the time when I was at the grocery store and I forgot my wallet. One of those days. This whole team forgot the wallet. Again, you can, people can relate to that. Stats. Well, I've been going on for a half hour here. The thing with stats is parcel them out. You don't want to hit someone over the head with a ream full of statistics. But when someone's at the plate or someone's at the foul line, that's when you drop them in. Mario Lemieux has averaged 1.5 points a game this year. How about that? As the camera's showing him there. Or it's amazing, if you notice that Shaquille O'Neal is actually better at the free throw line this year as he's bouncing the ball. Last year he was at 46%, and this year, he's hitting half his free throws. That's when you drop those in. And again, experience there. Like, Tom Brady's having a rough game. Last year against the Ravens, he completed 20 of 25 for 216 yards, or whatever. I'm just making that up. Figure out when the best way to work that in. Again, you're talking to several different audiences there, and you got to make them all happy. The other thing that I think that broadcasters need to do a better job with is that you can prepare for 4 or 5 different stories, but there's always a storyline or two in a game that makes itself apparent that you didn't think of. Kobe Bryant fouling out. would be one for basketball when he played, or the night just recently when Steph Curry got emotional when someone got thrown out of a game. How does that affect the team? Again, not everything is going to be life or death with these things, but you need to be able to pay attention to what's going on around you to go, oh, here's a storyline to follow. Bob, mediocre pitcher, through 3 innings, he hasn't walked anybody. He normally walks a few per 9 innings. He's had pinpoint control, and through 3 innings, he struck out 5, which his season high is 6. That becomes the story, and that becomes the focus. And at a higher level, you might know that Bob, mediocre pitcher, his pitching coach, as Texas A&M said, when a sinker's going, that's a pretty good thing. You might have read about that doing some prep work. Learn to pace those things in so you can be as fresh as in the later part of the game as you are at the beginning part of the game. But you got to let the game breathe. The fine line there, and I'll leave it with this, is that people aren't there to watch or listen to you. You are there to guide them through whatever it is they are watching, and to make them care about whatever it is that they're watching. That's why we have all the fluff pieces at the Olympics, because really, outside of the 10 people who do pole vault, who cares about pole vaulting? But if you see the story about the young lady who grew up in the tenements of Harlem and became the that she became, then you have a connection there. And again, it's all about sports is about storytelling, and getting that across. Sometimes those stories are just too numerous, and you just kind of grow down. Just show me the person that's actually jumping, or whatever it is. So the most effective broadcasters, in my view, have the fine line of keeping people, trying to be entertaining enough to keep you interested in, trying to give you enough information to make even the, stat hungriest people want to stick with you, but you don't want it to be a dry clinic. And again, it's a fine line, and you certainly, they're there to guide. They're not make it to there about themselves. I think that's what the best broadcasters of all time have done. They're there, they guide, they help you cheer, they make you understand, they might give you a laugh or two, but they're not making it about themselves. And again, everyone has different styles. Brent Musburger and Jim Nantz, 2 completely different styles. Brent Musburger was the guy that you really wanted to have a beer with. Jim Nantz is the best golf announcer ever. Jim McKay was the guy that was going to tell you a story about some guy on a, driving around the Eiffel Tower in a sports car. He was going to tell you he was the one that was going to make the slideshows interesting. Vin Scully, Ernie Harwell, the favorite uncles who you're going to spend a couple hours with at the boring family picnic or in the backyard on a Sunday afternoon, and just go and just share what they love. Isn't this the greatest thing ever? That's what they do. That's what the great announcers do. And they all have very different styles, but it's all in essence the same thing. Here we go. Here's your story. Oh, this popped up. Well, let me tell you about this. Let me sell you some beverages, tell you about what's coming up after the ball game, and buy the products, and let's share this, whatever it is, together. So hopefully that, I don't know if I've actually given you any tips or not, but that's what I think makes for a good broadcast and a good broadcaster. And always be nice to the people who are telling you what to do in your ear, because there's nothing in a real sports broadcast that doesn't have someone else involved, and their work is very important. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon. Have a good night, everybody.